and welcome. I am Chancellor Zabanda with the news, the headlines this evening. Scores of patients stranded as workers in some charm hospitals go on strike to demand pay hike. Major political parties back calls for Britain to compensate families of Malawians who suffered in the 1959 colonial atrocities. Former Vice President Justin Malawi says Malawi's state of politics and economy leave a lot to be desired. And in sports, Bullets FC ponder on obtaining a loan to fund its trip for a CAF assignment in Sudan. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail. Health workers in some health facilities run by the Christian Health Association of Malawi have gone on strike to demand a pay hike, despite a plea from unionists and authorities to delay the strike. The Nurses and Midwives Organization in Malawi and Christian Health Association representatives earlier said the strike will start on 12 March if government would not comply with the demand. But our reporters in several parts of the country, including in Sanje, Lilongwe, Zomba and Likoma, have confirmed strikes have begun in some mission hospitals, leaving scores of patients helpless. In another development, some nurses at Zomba Central Hospital have downed tools of unpaid allowances. The nurses told Zodiak they have stopped working on overtime duties because of the delayed payment and new conditions authorities have introduced for implementation of overtime pay. Zomba Central Hospital Principal Administrator Mr. Antonio Gamanga has acknowledged the problem but said the authorities are working towards addressing the issue. Major political parties have backed calls for Britain to compensate families of Malawians who suffered at the hands of colonialists during the 1959 struggle for independence. While Malawi Congress Party President Lazarus Chakwera said he would consider taking the matter to Parliament, UDF and the ruling DPP say there will be a lot of work involved to settle the matter. Jacqueline Shema has been getting the reactions and now reports.
Reacting to the call, ruling DPP spokesperson Francis Kasaira says proper scrutiny needs to be done on how best the compensation can be handled, especially by learning from other countries how such issues are handled.
Well, it's something that we need to think about and see how best that can be handled. Let's look at how our colleagues across our borders have handled similar situations. And from there, probably as a nation, we can make a decision on how best we can go forward.
Concurring with Kasaira, spokesperson for the United Democratic Front, Ken Ndanga, also said compensation for colonial atrocities is justifiable, as other countries also asked for the same, citing Germany as one of the countries.
I think they're justifiable because the trend elsewhere has been that if citizens of a particular country are butchered in that manner, I think those that orchestrated that kind of thing should be liable. And in this case, you remember history has it that Germany was forced to pay reparations as a result of the Second World War.
People's Party, through its spokesperson Kenny Msonda, says wider consultations are legally needed to properly help the relatives of those killed.
As a party, there is a way to handle matters of such magnitude. So as a party, we think we need wider consultations. We need our legal minds to sit down and see the best way how we can handle the issue.
President of the main opposition Malawi Congress Party, Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, earlier said consultations at Parliament level need to be done on the issue.
I will talk with necessary people, and if we have to bring it up in a setting of that nature, yes, but I will consider that.
The call for Britain to compensate families of those killed in the struggle for independence in 1959 came from lawyer and one member of parliament, Rafa Muhone, on 3rd March this year, as Malawi observed Matters Day. In Katabi alone, 31 were killed in a single incident on March 3, 1959, where scores of people protested the arrest of some officials of the Nyasaland African Congress Party who had been detained in a boat for supporting Dr. Hastings Kamuzu-Banda's struggle for independence. This is Jacqueline Shema for ZBS.
The U.S. government has partnered 3 private institutions in a $1.3 billion kwacha project to support smallholder farmers in growing crops like groundnuts, soya beans, and orange fresh sweet potato. Briefing the press in Blantyre, U.S. Ambassador to Malawi, Ms. Virginia Palmers, said through the partnership, over 20,000 farmers are expected to benefit in the next 3 years. The project is being implemented under the Feed the Future initiative of the United States Agency for International Development, Opportunity Bank, Universal Industries Limited, and RAB Processors. You're watching the news on Zodiac. We have more right after this. Welcome back. I am Chancellor Zabanda with the news. The headlines. Scores of patients stranded as workers in some CHAM hospitals go on strike to demand pay hike. Major political parties back calls for Britain to compensate families of Malawians who suffered in the 1959 colonial atrocities. Former Vice President Justin Malawi says Malawi's state of politics and economy leave a lot to be desired. And in sports, Bullets FC ponder on obtaining a loan to fund its trip for a CAF assignment in Sudan. Former Vice President Dr. Justin Malawi has cautioned that the country's state of politics and economy need a lot of work to be done for Malawians to become independent. He said this at a development conference underway in Lilongwe. According to Dr. Malawi, the majority of the country's development, especially education, continues to face challenges. Veronica Mare has the details.
I get letters, telephones every day.
Former Vice President Dr. Justin Malawi expressed concern that Malawi is still way too far to regaining her lost glory in socio-economic development. Among other things, Dr. Malawi said unemployment is one hitch choking progress in the country as a high number of youth live idly without a thing to do. Dr. Malawi has emphasized the need to create jobs, improve education standards, and monitor population growth and more if the country is to become economically independent. In his remarks, Norway State Secretary Hans Bratska, who is in Malawi on a 3-day visit, says Norway will continue investing in Malawi in areas of health, education, agriculture, just to mention a few, as a contribution to development. He says Norway is aware that it will take a long way to see Malawi achieving some of its goals, but is optimistic that things shall normalize with time, since Malawi has proven to be dedicated in achieving its goals. He, however, expressed concern at how people with disabilities are treated. Finance Minister Guru Kondwe said Norway has proven to be a reliable development partner for Malawi as it continues to offer assistance in several sectors, even at a time Malawi is facing a high number of challenges.
A misunderstanding that could see development projects within the capital city Lilongwe being thrown into disarray has risen between some councillors and block leaders. Some block leaders accuse the councillors of single-handedly appointing members of community development committees in their wards, saying this could jeopardize development activities. But Lilongwe City Mayor Wile Chipondera says all members of the CDCs were duly elected and development won't be affected. Winston Mwale has the details.
Trouble could be brewing in the capital Lilongwe as far as development is concerned. Membership of community development committees is the bone of contention. While block leaders and some members of the community say the current members of CDCs in the capital were imposed, councillors say this is not true. Take, for example, Kawale 1 ward. Here, Patrick Jonathan, chairperson of a splinter CDC in Kawale 1, says their councillor, who also happens to be the city mayor, Willie Chipondela, has formed a parallel CDC in the area. This may cause misappropriation of government funds. But Mayor Chipondela shot down the accusation, saying all members of CDCs in the capital were duly elected.
All the projects which are there, they have been, of course, pointed out by the chiefs as well as the members of parties or the community, I can say. They pointed out all the projects as well as some of the public works have been appointed by themselves. It won't affect anything and nobody will be affected. It was just a matter of implementing whatever they approved themselves. We have discussed, they were approved, then it's going to maneuver.
And in a desperate attempt of getting to the bottom of the matter, a local organization called I for Youth and Civic Education on Thursday organized a meeting for the leaders. The issue has come about because some members of CDCs have not been elected. Old members have been maintained. Most councillors have imposed party members into the CDCs. Meanwhile, it remains to be seen whether the meeting on Thursday will help solve the misunderstanding and see the leaders uniting for the sake of development in the capital. Winston Mwale, Zodiak.
Banja Lantsogolo BLM is stepping up provision of family planning services in the country by providing out free services on March 6 in a bid to reduce deaths of women during childbirth. The gesture is part of commemorations of the International Women's Day this month. This is Zodiak and you're watching the news. We now move on to sports. Bullets FC are seeking to secure a loan to fund their trip to Sudan for a CAF assignment against Al Hilal. The revelation comes after the team announced that 18.2 million kwacha was realized in gate collections during their game against Fomboni FC of Comoros Islands in Blantyre. Bullets General Secretary Harold Forte told Mike Bango of our sports desk that much of the proceeds were used to settle debts.
The tickets that were handed over to Big Bullets were of the total value of 24 million kwacha. Out of the 24 million kwacha tickets, we sold through the pre-sale tickets, the value of 15.4 million. When you try to investigate and find out what happened to the 8.6 million, as you and I were there at the stadium, we saw how people were scrambling for the tickets, and we were meant to believe that the agents whom we had entrusted with the selling of the tickets had exhausted all the lots that they had collected from the Big Bullets personnel responsible for the distribution of the tickets. The evaluation are that one sales agent by the name of Mr. Magola collapsed within the buildings of the stadium. Now the people that were around him just took him to the hospital and locked up the money and the tickets without proceeding with the selling of the tickets. As such, some tickets remained. And other tickets were locked in the car of our treasurer, Mr. Nkoma, who had left his car at a distance. Since he was busy doing other things, he didn't perhaps realize that he had locked the tickets in his car and could not go back and collect them. As such, we found that those tickets were retained, and these are the tickets that amounted to 8.6 million. And from the gate proceeds, we realized 2.8 million. So if this 2.8 million and add up to what we realized through the pre-sale of the tickets, it's coming up 10.2 million.
As Big Police, how much did you take after paying all the necessary people from the 18.2 million?
We didn't take much. As you know, out of the amount of money that I've mentioned, you have to take out 70% that went to the outsource. We paid the security, those that worked at the stadium. Unfortunately, we had a lot of problems. Therefore, most of the money that was meant for the Big Bullets by paying our debtors, and we had unfortunately even taken the share for farm as well as the stadium. Therefore, at the moment, we're looking at the ways and means of how we will repay these other stakeholders. So, in other words, Big Bullets has used all the money that was real at this game. We are organizing this game on almost empty coffers. So everything that was done in regard to the organization and preparation for the game was done on borrowed money. We are pleased to inform our forwards that have paid off all the debt, so we have now a clean slate. So what remains now is to hunt for the money that will enable us to take us to fulfill our second fixture, that is in Sudan, which is in Sudan.
One of the contestants for the position of Super League of Malawi Vice President Gregory Madea has promised to assist football teams in the country in marketing the game. Madea, who is challenging Gift Nkandawire and Daud Suleiman, says his experience in marketing and sales will help him to transform Solom if he wins the March 14 polls.
Mr. Bango, after having been in the management of football at the club level, I was convinced that there's a lot to do to learn the Super League of Malawi. Instead of only concentrating on the clubs, managing the teams, I thought I deserve to develop the football at the higher level. Now looking at the corporate issues, now I will be involved in the issues of policy at the Super League. By not only looking at what I'm going to do with the Super League of Malawi, I want to dwell down to the teams. My initiative is to make the teams self-reliable. I'm an experienced marketer, and looking at how we are managing football here in Malawi, I think we all know that the song of the day is no sponsorship, asking for sponsorship, donors, whatever. But I'm saying that has proved that it's not possible for each and every team to be sponsored. But in the event that there are other teams which I can support by engaging them into marketing activities, training them, here I'm saying that I work with the executive members, train them, sit down with them. What is it that we can do to develop their team? 100% right. When I was joining Big Bullets as an executive member, before I was voted as the chairman, I was running the marketing department. And one thing I did, which was the first thing to do, was to convince my fellow members, all stakeholders. When I talk of stakeholders, especially for Big Bullets, being a big team, I had to involve even supporters, trustees. After having discussed, we came up to the conclusion that we can run this team even without sponsorship. That's why you see Bullets still alive to date. We had to engage stakeholders, sit down and agree one thing. I'm not sure and I'm not convinced that on my own I can deliver. I have to involve and engage everybody interested in the football. Definitely, that's what I'm aiming at. I have to work with my fellow members. Once elected, I'll make sure that we put our house in order, meaning the Solom house. And from there, we go down to the teams, assist them. It pains me to see small teams just coming in, and a year later, they're out of the competition or they're out of the Solom. It pains me. So now I'm looking at assisting each and every team without looking at how big the team is. But wherever I can, I need to involve myself in the marketing initiative of marketing the teams.
We now go across the borders. Police and Family Relations say the woman who was beaten to death in northern Nigeria on suspicion of being a suicide bomber was in fact mentally ill and not involved in terrorism. Tabita Haruna, 33, was attacked by a mob on Sunday after she refused to be screened at a marketplace in Bauchi. Details in this BBC report.
Police in Nigeria are investigating the attack and they have not arrested any suspect. Boko Haram militants based in northern Nigeria have been using women to carry out suicide bombings. The militants want to impose a strict version of Islam and have declared a caliphate in the territory under their control. Ms. Huruna was set upon by a mob last Sunday after she refused to be searched by vigilantes at the entrance to a market. Nigerian soldiers have failed to end Boko Haram's 6-year insurgence.
Liberia has released its last Ebola patient after going a week without any new cases of the virus, according to the World Health Organization. Beatrice Yadoro, 58, left a Chinese-run treatment center in the capital Monrovia after 2 weeks of treatment. Nearly 10,000 people have died from Ebola, the vast majority in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. WHO officials said there were 132 new cases in Guinea and Sierra Leone in the week to 1st March. You've been watching the news on Zodiac. The headlines as we go. Scores of patients stranded as workers in some CHAM hospitals go on strike to demand pay hike. Major political parties back calls for Britain to compensate families of Malawians who suffered in the 1959 colonial atrocities. Former Vice President Justin Malewezi says Malawi's state of politics and economy leave a lot to be desired. And in sports, Bullets FC ponder on obtaining a loan to fund its trip for a CAF assignment in Sudan. I am Chancellor Mozabanda. Goodbye for now and have a good night.